never really have high expectations for NBC's live musicals anymore. Ever since the debacle that was Peter Pan Live, I've not really had much interest in looking into them other than, hey, it's yearly musicals. And so when I came into Jesus Christ Superstar Live, I really didn't expect much, but I was shocked, both in a good way and in a bad way. Especially after seeing two versions that didn't really live up to what I'd come to love about Jesus Christ Superstar. It was amazing to see a show that, for the most part, gets it. It understands the source material. The in-concert setup got in the way a lot less than I thought it would. The set was pretty big, so there's a lot of space to move around on it, and I greatly appreciate minimalism. And with a show like Jesus Christ Superstar, you don't really need to have an elaborate set like Phantom in order to do it right. I also love that they had what I think were the Stations of the Cross out in the background. To be frank, I can't really say for certain if that's what they did because I was having trouble paying attention to it. The action on stage was just that good. My eyes were drawn elsewhere, so I wasn't just looking around at pillars or something like I was in the 2000 version, just like, well, this is boring. They knew how to choreograph their performers to the overture, and it was spectacular. It was high energy and everything looked so fun. It was hard not to get into the wonderful score that is the overture. One part where the in-concert setup didn't really work well was the crowd. For the most part, they were fine, especially in sequences where they were trying to underline Jesus' superstardom. But there were a few points where the crowd kind of got in the way to the point where we couldn't even hear the singers sing, specifically Judas with his opening number. But as I said, that was for the most part a one-off situation, and they were fine for the rest of the show. And speaking of Judas, I love this guy. I forgot to look up his name before I started recording, but he's wonderful. He deserves all the roles and all the awards or whatever. I mean, first of all, from what I hear, he's the Aaron Burr who gave that "please don't be a jerk" speech to Mike Pence. And then secondly, he's just wonderful. He has a great voice and he's a wonderful actor. Plus, he's not the villain. Judas here isn't portrayed as a bad guy or someone who's actively malicious. He really gets the character, and so does the director or whoever's telling him to act this way. His performance is so heartfelt, and in the bit where he's getting ready to hang himself, I just kept thinking, I just want to give this guy a hug. Poor Judas. And also, he did the best kiss that I've ever seen. Just looking at Jesus, knowing he wanted to do something to say, I did this for your good. I don't hate you. And then going to just give him a kiss, just something to say that. And not to mention, he's the one who didn't want to let Jesus go after their embrace. The guards had to rip him away from Jesus. Whereas Jesus, of course, was just like, I knew this was coming, and you trying to grapple onto me won't make it any easier. And during the Jesus Christ Superstar number, he's just wonderful. He's playing to the crowd greatly, and he has so much energy. Where does he get all that energy? Really, next to Carl Anderson, I think he's my favorite Judas. I can't really decide between the two, but I'm happy to have them both. They're just wonderful. And he certainly put to rest a lot of the worries I had going into the show. Though some of my worries were rather justified and unfortunately came to pass. Specifically, John Legend as Jesus. In my very little bit of research before going into the show, I saw that John Legend really didn't have much acting under his belt. And after seeing a lot of stunt casting throughout a lot of different media, I was very concerned about it. And overall, he did an okay job, not quite passable though. For one, especially in high intensity moments, he would just raise his shoulders like this, just, I don't get it, stop raising your freaking shoulders. He even managed to do it while he was on the cross. It's just like, it looked ridiculous, not like a man who's under a lot of emotional stress or something. He's just all like, who are you to criticize, or who are you? It's insane. Unfortunately, he also clearly doesn't have the voice for Jesus. He's wonderful on the low end to the point where I really gotta give him credit for his performance there. But he clearly has little to no body on the high end. It was very clear that he was struggling to hit his high notes, and that when he did, it didn't really have much force to it, and that they also had to bring some of his notes down to fit better with his voice. And so I swear I've said this at least somewhere, or maybe I just said this out of my videos, but I always thought that among all the versions, at the very least, there's no way to get the Gethsemane song wrong. And they managed to screw that up. Part of it, again, is John Legend's inability to hit all the notes to the point where it kind of just got rather, I guess, hilariously silly towards the end when he's supposed to be high energy, really emotionally crying out to God, like, why the hell do you want me to die? It doesn't come off as this guy is under a lot of emotional strain, just like so over the top where you'd swear this was like a sitcom or something, because only people act that badly in sitcoms. And then another part of it is he doesn't really dramatize the scene well, like with his body. He's just sort of standing there with his bottle, and I think the bottle is what really kills it for me. He can't really do much like moving around because he's just, waving his bottle around. Once he puts it down, then he gets a little bit better, but then he starts doing that shoulder thing again. It was really ineffective, and I didn't feel the emotions for Jesus. I just felt, wow, they screwed this up pretty spectacularly. I also didn't like John Legend's face and, I guess, lack of reaction to people basically saying, hey, would you fight for me? Would you die for me? Like, he was just going along with the crowd. We didn't know that he felt badly or didn't like anything until we've just cut to him sitting at the table being all forlorn. Now, part of that is an issue with the camera and I guess not focusing on Jesus enough, but I feel like they did, and the real issue is John Legend just didn't react to what everyone else was saying. And when you think about it, it's pretty troubling what Simon is suggesting. Basically telling Jesus how to manipulate the crowd into giving him all the power and the glory that there is, even above Rome. Which, I don't know if you guys know history, but Rome is pretty big at this point. I really like this Mary. She doesn't have the best voice, but she's still wonderful. She does not just a passable job, but a pretty good one. How she's portrayed is just so wonderful. She's like the embodiment, for the most part, of what Jesus is trying to teach. Forgiveness, trying to help others through their tough times. We see her always trying to comfort Jesus' followers, even Jesus himself, and at one point even goes up to Judas to try to comfort him and just be like, hey, I know you just got in a fight with Jesus, but it's okay. I also really like how they actually gave context to Jesus calling everyone shallow, thick, and slow by having the followers move away from Mary as Judas is pointing out, hey, she's a prostitute, and on the outside, she stands against everything we teach. Showing how easily the followers can be swayed from one side to the next, and that Jesus has to be the one to corral them, basically hinting to what's gonna come when Jesus isn't there to do it anymore. I think I said somewhere in one of my past videos that I thought Norm Lewis was going to play Pilate, and I was wrong. He's playing Caiaphas, which worked out pretty well too. His voice was great, and he was doing a good job of rocking those cornrows. I did notice, though, that in the Jesus Must Die sequence, two of the guys that were on stage seemed just more like table fillers because they weren't really singing and they didn't have a part in the song, which is weird because you can have way more people involved with Jesus Must Die. Hell, they did that in some of the versions, like the 73 and the 2012 version. But no, they just kind of sat there and did nothing the entire song. Hell, there were even chair fillers in the scene where Judas is basically confessing the information that he has to the priest. I think I know what they were trying to do with the Roman guards, like, get up, but wow, it looked ridiculous. The thing that went through our minds as we watched was they're basically wearing condoms on their heads. And I don't know if you've ever seen anyone wearing a condom over their head. That's not really imposing. Gotta say before I move on though, I love Simon. I love his look, his voice, his everything. He's also one of those guys who has just so much energy you don't know where he gets it from, to the point where you just kind of want to bottle it up and just, keep for moments where you have none. I'm not really sure how I feel about the temple scene. On the one hand, I really like the symbolism of them doing coke or whatever the glitter was supposed to represent on a cross. It helped to give better visual representation that this is supposed to be somewhere holy. But on the other hand, it wasn't that interesting of a sequence. I also have to wonder, how the hell are they going to clean up that glitter? If you ever have worked in musical or performance theater, glitter and feathers are a techie's worst nightmare. But overall, I guess it was okay. I'm still not certain how I feel about it. Although, I gotta say, Jesus going in with a chair, that is intimidating. I can understand why they'd all scatter after seeing that. In other versions, Jesus just, kind of runs in like, hey, yo, get out of here. Like in the 2000 version, he just threw a TV and that was about it. But in this version, dude's got a chair. Even though he's outnumbered, he's got a chair. And he's not afraid to use it by the looks of it. Another thing that I really liked about this version is that they had girls as apostles. It made me think that, especially with a show like this that isn't aiming at all to be historically accurate in their casting, why not have ladies in roles that would have historically been men? It's an idea I've been playing around for a while now, and after seeing the 2004 Takarazuka Phantom production, I'm kind of keen to see this played with more. Just, the gender swapping of roles. Sure, not all productions are really form-fitted for this sort of thing, but Jesus Christ Superstar kind of is. As long as you can hit the notes that you need to and are a decent actor, I don't see why not. And speaking of the Last Supper sequence, I really, really like how Judas can't really convincingly say that he hates Jesus. He just can't put the emotion forth to make someone believe that he hates this man because he doesn't believe it himself, which then makes it more poignant when Jesus says, "You liar, you Judas." Something else that I remembered that I really didn't like about the Gethsemane song is that there really wasn't any transition from, "Why should I die?" to, "Okay, I guess I'll die." It didn't really sound like he took into account anything about the thought of God basically having this all planned. It was like he was just reading it from a songbook. It didn't sound like he was broken up necessarily. He was just singing a song without the emotion that's supposed to carry. It's as though he's singing it in a rehearsal to where they've not yet put the emotion through to where you'd be allowed to make technically wrong vocal decisions. The guy who played Pilate is pretty good. He's not my favorite Pilate, basically because I love Barry Dennen too much. But he's wonderful. I love how he's basically talking down to Jesus even as he crouches down. He does it with such flair, just like, "I'm lowering myself to your level, but I'm not at your level." There's so much emotion when he's talking about the dream that he had, and then also when he realizes who Jesus is. I also really dig his hairstyle. That was pretty cool too. I think another reason why I'm not as keen into this Pilate than, say, the guy that they had in the 73 version is his voice isn't my favorite. I can recognize that it is good, but not quite my favorite sound being made with those words. More of a personal preference. I frankly think he did a wonderful job though. Alice Cooper's King Herod was another one I was kind of concerned with, but then not because I heard he'd played Herod before, and I wasn't too impressed. Unfortunately, it seems the years of being Alice Cooper has really weighed on him. He didn't really have a lot of energy to him. He just sort of stood there swaying back and forth with his cane, which his cane is awesome, by the way. Vocally, at least, he did convey the emotions and the sort of intensity of Herod as he sang, but just his movements weren't that impressive. I can't really begrudge them for casting him as King Herod because, frankly, I've seen worse. I've gotta say though, I really enjoyed how he was sort of able to command the crowd, kind of like a king would. He has his fans and he's also able to play to his fans. And yet we can see how easily he'll turn on someone once they prove or seem to prove that they're not who they say they are. One could think that how they portrayed Judas's death was sort of being like, think of the children type, don't show violence or death on screen, but I kind of liked it. I really liked the symbolism and the shorthand conveyed with kicking the ladder over. It's powerful and you didn't have to show a body or some sort of figure swaying. It also was probably a lot easier to do considering that his shirt didn't really do a good job of hiding a harness that they'd need in order to do such a thing. I think it was also a really good decision to not have Jesus on stage during the Jesus Christ Superstar song for the most part. When he's just being dragged around or just standing there, it really distracts from the fun of the song. It's hard to get swept up with the dancers or Judas's wonderful performance when you're being constantly reminded, hey, this guy's about to die. And speaking of the song itself, it was so fun! I love the costumes, I especially love Judas's sparkles. It was great! Everything was so high energy, you could just really get into it, which makes an even bigger contrast to when we do cut to Jesus and we realize, oh yeah! The man's about to die. It was a really good transition too, because there we are reveling in the triumph of the performers, and then they look to the side, and then we see Jesus just there on the cross. Sort of like, we've had our fun now. Now the serious stuff begins again. I like how when John Legend was being taken off the set while still on the cross, the light in the background sort of glared as though saying that he is going up to heaven or into God's hands. Or maybe it could be a symbol of his eventual resurrection. Or maybe they just did it because it's cool, which it really was. I really like how the wall split up into yet another cross shape, making it look really nice, especially when the light did come in. It made for a pretty spectacular exit. Overall, I think I'd recommend this version, just not someone's first introduction to Jesus Christ Superstar. John Legend did a pretty poor job in some very key moments to where I wouldn't show someone this if I'm trying to get them into the show. But I'm definitely not going to put this version down. Most of the other performances went above and beyond what I expected, especially the guy who played Judas, who now I need to keep on the lookout for. They brought in so much great talent to the point where it's really disappointing that John Legend didn't quite live up to his castmates. And this is why I say I was surprised in a good way and in a bad way. This version failed on points that I didn't think a version can, but then it also impressed me. Finally, a show was able to get Judas right. Plus, they switched the wanted need thing back. There were people who just got it. They understood the source material and wanted to reproduce it with the same emotions and message that it's supposed to carry. I really hope that they release a soundtrack for this. For all I know, they already have, because I want to keep listening to this Judas's version of Heaven on Their Minds. It is wonderful. Actually, I want to listen to all of his songs. He's great. Thank you very much for consuming this video, and until next time.